I'm Devin Thorpe. I'm the CEO of the Supercrowd Inc., and I call myself a champion of social good.
What inspired you to become a champion of social good?
Oh, golly, Michael, it really goes back to an experience I had as a child. And forgive me for sharing the story, but when I was 11 years old, I was living in Salt Lake City, and about 300 miles from where we lived in southern Idaho, a dam broke. It was called the Teton Dam, and it failed the first time it was built. And as you can imagine, that left a huge flood, and it washed through the relatively small town of Rexburg, Idaho. And in that town, about a dozen people were killed, but about 80% of the structures were damaged or destroyed. And so really communities from all around the West that summer volunteered in organized ways to come that visit Rexburg that summer and help dig the muck and mud out of basements. And my dad asked me if I wanted to go when he took a turn. And I said, well, sure. I thought playing in the mud sounded like a good time. And so I went, and I remember I was just giddy with excitement. I remember every telephone pole we passed in the middle of the night, riding from 2 a.m. to dawn to get to Rexburg to do the work. And we worked all day. And, I remember nothing from going home. I passed out in the bus going home. And it was really a remarkable experience. And I remember, well, recently I've been back to visit Rexburg, and the surprising thing is I couldn't find the statue that they had erected in my honor. I was a little bit disappointed. And I recognize now as an adult that, the truth is, even though that was an important event for me, I really didn't contribute anything. I probably ate more donuts than I was worth, and really couldn't do much. I wasn't strong enough. I remember they gave me the worst shovel because no one else wanted it. and so I was almost worthless. That said, the experience was so life-changing for me. I vowed that I would never miss an opportunity to serve other people. I confess that I have many times. I still have not perfected the art. It's hard, but that desire to help other people does define now what I do. So that's the long answer to your question, why I do this work.
Well, I see some of the books you wrote behind you, and then you do a podcast as well. How is it getting that message out using those mediums?
Well, it's interesting. You do a better job than I do. And I'm impressed. And I hope that you and I can talk over the coming months, years, as we learn to collaborate, perhaps. But I know I've got a lot to learn from you. It's challenging. I have one book that I know has been read over 1 million times. That's exciting to me, but I generally give it away for free. And so I don't make a lot of money from that. I kind of wish I had, but I'm glad that it touches people. I'm glad that people love that book, and it helps people manage their money better. And I hope that they begin to think about how they can use their money for good as they read the book. And that's the point of that book. I've written others to help people with crowdfunding and otherwise having social impact and doing good in the world. But it's challenging to get people to buy books. I will just admit that. The show, I just love doing it. I've got to tell you, and I'm excited now. We're also streaming on television on our channel, and that's helping to grow our audience a little bit. But it's a wonderful thing to be able to do. I think you could probably relate, Michael, that the people you get to meet, you and I have at least one guest in common. I suspect there are others, but I noticed recently we've both had the bipolar general on the show, and he's a remarkable guy. And so I know that that you are experiencing a similar thing to me, and that is you get to talk to amazing people,
Yes.
truly amazing people, people that are just deeply good. And some are famous and extraordinary, and others are a little bit more ordinary, but all that deep goodness in people comes out, and you get to see and interact with that and talk to people about those passions, the things that drive them to be good and do good. And that is just such an uplifting thing to be doing all the time, and building a network of people who are doing good and thinking about that as a practice. Man, how could you not do that after you start? I can't quit. I'm addicted. So, again, I have a lot to learn about expanding the market and getting more eyeballs on this content, because I think we have important messages, but and I hope I can learn from you. But it is a lot of fun to do that work.
I agree with you. Talking to people, it's like it helps my own mental health, and I'm just, talking about them.
Yeah. It is so good to be able to talk to people. One of the things that I think you and I recognize is that doing good in the world, helping other people, even the simplest, smallest acts of kindness, make us feel better. There's a corollary I experience. I think many of us do. When I am mean to people, and I wish that never happened, right? But that's not the reality. The reality is sometimes I'm not kind to people, and I feel terrible. When I do that. And so I work really hard to avoid that. I haven't cured myself of that pattern. And so as I think about, those two things, right? Doing something genuinely kind, even small, makes me feel good, makes me feel better. Doing something even small, but that is unkind, makes me feel bad. Boy, I mean, which do I want to do more of, right? It's not even a contest in terms of conscious choosing. And so trying to build those patterns, like you say, it's a good sort of mental health practice to focus on doing the good, to feel the good.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about the super crowd?
Yeah, so we're just having so much fun with this. We're hosting events around the country, and we do virtual events as well, and so we're bringing people together to talk about how to support community builders, social entrepreneurs, and diverse founders. What we recognize is that in every one of us lives in a community. We live somewhere is local for all of us, right? And all of us, I think, would like to see something about our community improve. I think even in the most affluent, nice communities, like I think my son lives in Palo Alto, so I get over to Palo Alto, probably the richest city in the country, if not the richest, one of the very richest. And there are a lot of things you could improve in Palo Alto, right? It's not that it's all broken. I don't mean to suggest that, but affordable housing is a big challenge in Palo Alto, for instance. And so there are opportunities in every single community to make things a little bit better. And so one of the ways that we can do that and allow everyone in the community to participate in an organic way in the prosperity that we create in the community is through shared ownership or shared investments via crowdfunding. So that's a thing, an aspect of that excites me in the work that we're doing at the Super Crowd. And we're not working as intermediaries. We're not a portal. We're educating people. We're training people. We're guiding people through this process, both as entrepreneurs and investors, and trying to help more people see themselves as investors. And of course, the same kinds of principles apply to social entrepreneurs. And I get so excited. I see some of the coolest things that are being funded on crowdfunding sites like WeFunder and Raise Green and many others. And they just do really cool stuff. There's some really cool technologies that clearly have the potential to make the world a better place, addressing especially climate change. There's so many opportunities to create, zero emission vehicles that do cool things, right? Like there's one company that's building little retro cars that really are old. They're electric motorcycles,
Oh,
three-wheeled, now enclosed in these really cool shells. They're not super high tech, but how fun! How fun you could drive, have your little daily commuter be just the coolest looking vehicle in the parking lot. And it's like a $25,000 electric car that doesn't go very far, but it's a great commuter vehicle and a fun one to have, and it gets it's way better for the planet than driving your
right.
Hummer to the office. Anyway, you just see cool things all the time, and some of them are really, really genuinely fun and exciting, and they have some social benefit. And then the third group we focus on is diverse founders, and there's great data, right? If you look at the venture capital markets, you don't need to go any farther than thinking about women,
Right.
to recognize that women are getting, it depends on the survey you read, 1% to 3% of venture capital, 1% to 3%, and 50% of the humans on the planet are women. And let's be clear, they are a really high proportion too of entrepreneurs. And that proportion is growing rapidly, but the proportion of venture capital going to women isn't changing. It hasn't changed since I started looking at this question a decade ago. And so what's exciting is in the crowdfunding space, we do see women getting a much larger share. And so now we've found a way to support women and other diverse founders. And this is exciting to me. So again, I've gone on a long time, but the super crowd is all about helping the entrepreneurs, educating, training, coaching them, and also on educating, training, and coaching investors, ordinary people, right? All of us now can invest under the crowdfunding rules, but it's a scary thing. I confess, I wrote about crowdfund investing for 7 years before I did the first one, right? So I get really well that it's kind of a scary thing, even to plunk down $100 as an investment. And so that empathy, I'm trying to channel that empathy and help people get over that hump to make that first $100 investment. Because after you do it a few times, you realize it doesn't break the budget, the world doesn't end, you can keep going, and it's really kind of a fun thing that it can be. Anyway, sorry, that's the world at the super crowd.
Well, I know a lot of nonprofits I talk to, their mission first. So they focus on the mission, but maybe the business side, they're new to it. How important is it to have a support system on the business side?
Yeah, that is a great, great question, because let's be really clear, all nonprofits are businesses, and all nonprofits have to be profitable. Accountants in the nonprofit space, of course, use a variety of other terms to describe the profits. But if you don't raise more money in donations and other revenues than you spend, you're out of business, just like any other business. So business principles are vitally important. And oftentimes, a nonprofit is built by people who have a passion for doing good in the world, and they build the momentum around volunteers. And so there's a little bit of a distance between that business mindset and the reality of what they're building. But as they scale, eventually you've got to start hiring people, raising more money, and those business principles become vitally important really quickly. And so, yeah, it's great to build a board that includes some people who have good business experience. It's great to recruit people who have business experience, not just nonprofit experience. Those things can really come together. I am so grateful, though. I see in the nonprofit space over and over again, I see brilliant people doing incredible work. And occasionally I hear people suggesting that because the compensation rates may be lower in the nonprofit space, that the people aren't as bright or talented, that great people pursue the money. Balderdash. what I see is that mission-driven people go where they can have the most impact, and oftentimes that's in a nonprofit, and they are brilliant, hardworking, passionate people, really making a tremendous difference in the world.
Well, you do a lot to help others, but what do you do to help your own mental health?
That's a fun question, because I finally had to come to terms with the challenges I have faced with mental illness myself. And a little over a year ago, finally got a diagnosis that helps me understand a little bit about my challenges, and really took some time. Took some time off work, took about 3 weeks off to really clear my head. I went on a 1-week vacation, but then I devoted 2 full weeks splitting the time between home improvement time, where I could be working with my hands instead of my brains a little bit, and then really devoted time to reading and meditating and learning how to take care of myself so that I could return to work in a better headspace. And so for me, I found that the primary tools I use are not drugs. I was prescribed a drug to take when I'm in a bit of a crisis, right? And that does help. But what I find is more helpful are the cognitive behavioral therapies that help me avoid getting in the crisis in the first place, so that I'm not winding down. And there are a variety of things I use. I've got a silly app on my phone, and I just giggle sometimes, but it's an app that gives me positive feedback all the time. And because I have a tendency, I get too down on myself. I get really hard. I get critical, self-critical, especially if I do anything mean to people. No matter how justified I may reasonably have been, if I do anything mean, I always feel bad. And there's a tendency then in the past for me just to spiral down and start thinking really horrible thoughts. And it was as I was, trying to figure out how to cope with that I've come onto some of these things. So I think it's, everybody has a different need. But for me, what I really felt like the challenge was my self-esteem, that I just really did not feel like I had a high enough self-image. I still struggle with that, I think. And it's weird. It sounds so, self-aggrandizing in some way. I don't know how to say that. It just seems weird. But so I consciously have chosen a variety of ways to consciously try to remind myself that I am okay.
Yeah.
I'm okay. And I found that consistently doing that really helps, because the voice that we hear the most is the voice in our heads. And if that voice is constantly talking about how dumb you are and how fat you are and how ugly you are and how lazy you are and et cetera, how mean you are, that can get really weighty. And so a variety of tools. And there's a great book I read. I think it's just called Self-Esteem or something like that. But self-esteem is the key to the title. And it was written over a decade ago, but it's really proven, I think, for a lot of people to be helpful. In fact, I loved the book so much, I gave it to a lot of friends and family members that I think struggle with some of the same issues that I do, and I've encouraged them to read it. I mean, it's a long, thoughtful book, and it's a lot of homework. And so I made time, during that time off, to do the homework and really start to develop some patterns and practices. So I apologize. I've kind of given you a very full answer, but I didn't want to treat that lightly, because I think it's an important question, and every one of us needs to come to terms with it on our own terms.
No, it's good. I have no time limit, so please talk. What are some of the things that motivate you?
I really am passionate really about 3 fundamental causes. Climate change is one. And I realize that one kind of feels so political these days, but even if, some folks are skeptical about climate change per se, some of the politics around that, let's be clear, we all want clean air. We all want clean water. Those are things we can aspire to, and we can agree that we've got to find some common ground for finding those things. And most things that preserve and protect clean air and clean water help on climate change. That's just a coincidence. But maybe we can focus on clean air and clean water. That's a hang up to people. The second thing is poverty. And a lot of my friends like to call it social justice, and those two things are a little bit different, but they're closely related. And there are people in almost every community in the United States, affluent country, right, that are living on the streets, right? So there's poverty right here among us, and in every city in America, right? Something like 10 to 20% of the population, it varies, is living below the poverty line, and many of them have housing and other things, but they're food insecure and have other challenges. This is a problem. It's a real problem close to home. But of course, around the world, somewhere in the range of 700 million to a billion people are living in really genuinely abject poverty, right? They're living on less than $2 a day, and don't have adequate food, don't have access to clean water, don't have a place to use the toilet. There are a lot of people in this community. And so there are tremendous opportunities for us to address that. Third, for me, is global health. And this has been a long-term passion. And I've been more optimistic about this in the past, but obviously the pandemic, it started nearly 4 years ago, is now a reminder that global health is really fragile, and we need to be using best practices and the science. And of course, one of the things I would point out that's encouraging in this terrible experience of the pandemic is that when we had the 1918 pandemic, right, it was clear early on that what we needed was a vaccine for the flu. You know what? They didn't come up with a working vaccine for the flu for almost 20 years, right? So the 1918 pandemic lasted about 3 years, kind of flamed out after that. But, the flu is still around to this day. Right. It's the same flu, and it varies a little bit every year. The variations that were circulating in 1918 were just deadly. Just a deadly variation. And so everybody got the flu, and many, many people died. In fact, it was the same time as World War I, and more soldiers died from the flu than from conflict. It was just tragic. Anyway, of course, we had a vaccine ready to go in the United States within a year of the first documented case of COVID-19. That is a remarkable, remarkable difference. And so there is hope that with technology and our best practices, we can get on top of things. So it's conceivable to envision a day when a vaccine could be prepared in weeks and be used to treat people in a local community before, like if they'd had a vaccine working in weeks in Wuhan, we might not have experienced the global pandemic. And you could get that vaccine to places around the world where it started to pop up. Anyway, those are the kinds of things that I like to think about. And one of the things that I've been close to over the years is polio fighting. Through Rotary International. Rotary's been supporting the effort to eradicate polio. And a lot of us think of polio as eradicated, but in fact, last year there were dozens of cases. This year, I think we've had about a dozen in the world. And so again, we're right on the cusp of eliminating polio from the planet. But we got down into single digits a few years ago, and then it popped back up. It's really, really, really hard. And polio is one of those that we can eradicate because nobody else gets it. Other critters don't get the same virus. And there are other things, other diseases that other critters get. And so we can get them from, and other critters can spread them. But some diseases are only human, and polio is one of those. So we can eliminate it. So anyway, fingers crossed. I talk too much. That's why I'm a better host than a guest.
No, you're a good guest. So where do you want to see your own mission in the next like 3 to 5 years?
You know, where I am focusing a lot of my energy, I love the show, and I can't imagine quitting it because I love it so much. And we're putting a little more energy on the show into supporting social entrepreneurs who are raising on crowdfunding, trying to bring a little of that energy from our super crowd events into the show. But where I really want to see progress is in growing the number of people who are investing in these kinds of projects via crowdfunding. And over a span of 5 years, I'm hopeful that we can increase that number 5 to 10-fold. And within 10 years, I'm hoping that we can increase it 100-fold. And in 20, I'm hoping we can increase it 1,000-fold. The reality that everyone can do this means that it has the potential over 20 years to become the way we invest for our retirement. Rather than investing in Wall Street, we're investing directly in companies, having more social impact, and building portfolios the way very thoughtful professionals already do it in both the venture capital community and at banks, right? Building carefully crafted portfolios that have good financial returns, but that are also driving social impacts that are important to us. And that might be, supporting veterans. That might be an important thing. Well, golly, if you wanted to build a portfolio that only included veteran leaders, you could do that. You could do that. For others, it's supporting women. For others, it's supporting African Americans. For others, it's building a diverse portfolio, including all those kinds of folks. And whatever it is, right? There are ways to do that in a way that will be high impact and profitable. And that's where I really am putting a lot of my energy and my vision, right, is on trying to bring that about so that people say, oh, holy cow, I could take some of the money that I have invested in, ETFs and mutual funds, and I could move them into things that would have a more direct impact and have comparable, maybe better returns. Wow, that's a great thing to be thinking about. So that's where I'm hoping to go.
How can people reach out and learn more?
I've got 2 main websites. Let's start with superpowers4good.com. Superpowers4good.com. That's the name of my show. I use the word 4 in the show. I use the number 4 in the URL. And that's where you can subscribe. You can see past episodes. You can also get the newsletter there. And so you see my write-ups of the show and other things, kind of the show notes and all of that there at Superpowers for Good. And then there are links to all of my other sites and my social media and stuff there. But that's a great place to start to sort of join the super crowd.